Hello and welcome to AXSchat. We're delighted that we've got Sminu Jindal joining us today. It's great to have you with us. It's really good for us to be talking to people who are doing work in the field that is outside of the UK and the US. So you're joining us from India today, and so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing with your organisation and how it all came about?
Okay. I'm Sminu Jindal. Thank you so much for having me on this chat. It means a lot to me. Had met with a car accident when I was 11 years old, and that left me as a wheelchair user. Um, and that's when, really my journey started in terms of how difficult life can be. India is a developing nation, and but when I had met with an accident way back in '84, there was hardly any accessibility around. My parents did the best they could to have me go to a regular school, go to a regular college. I finished my MBA, and currently I'm managing director of a big company, and its turnover would be around $1 billion at the moment. And I look after businesses independently, and yet I still wanted to do something for other people so that they don't go through the difficulties I went through. I was lucky enough to be born into a rich family. Not everybody is that lucky. And for me, accessibility became an all consuming passion because I felt accessibility affects many, many people other than just the disabled. Uh, we all know that we are able bodied for a very limited period in our lives. Let's say if we are lucky from the age group of 20 to 50. But nowadays, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, lifestyle diseases don't really see age. We've got pregnant women, we've got small little children, we've got adults who break a bone and have temporary disabilities. We all benefit with accessibility. I feel accessibility is one way that helps us become happier humans because as human beings, we're all social animals. And to be disconnected from the rest of the world, do nothing but sit in your own room is like a punishment like no other. It's almost being a prison to your own, um, being a prison in your own house, in your own surroundings. So accessibility was a major drive that I started way back in 2000 and have been actively working towards changing infrastructure and transport mediums since the year 2007. I've been working with all government bodies, like all ministries almost, beginning from education to urban development, railways, civil aviation, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, you name it, we are there. Yet I feel there is so little that we've done in spite of our unstinting loyalty towards this cause for so long.
It's amazing what you are doing. I think we all sometimes feel that there's so much more to be done that we lose sight of what we've actually achieved. So, but equally, I'm 100% with you when you're talking about the concept of accessibility bringing joy, enabling the human condition of us being sociable. It's a much bigger enabler than just giving people access to stuff, and it's one of the reasons why I think we're all doing what we do right now is because it gives us joy to do this stuff, to continue working in the field, because actually it's a very rewarding field to be working in despite all of the challenges. So the work that you're doing around transport infrastructure, now our prejudiced view of transport in India is what we see from the films and from it's fairly chaotic. Now surely that and I know that's not always the case because there's a lot of development work going on too, but surely that makes life very hard in terms of delivering accessibility when you've got a lot of sort of random stuff happening in the streetscape.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Actually, in India, accessibility has just started as a campaign, which our current Honorable Prime Minister started it. And he started with a vision in terms of making the buildings accessible. And transport is also being made accessible, but it is not at a speed at which we would want it to be. Yet, it's light at the end of the tunnel that at least one government has understood how big this cause is, because without accessibility, there can be no sustainability. So, Swayam, which I forgot to mention, is the organization that's working on it, is the organization that I represent today. We've been working for the transport sector also for a very long time. It does look very chaotic, yet I feel that what we fail doing is raising awareness in this area. Today, even international travels, when they travel long haul, you don't have an accessible bathroom in an aeroplane. And why is it that none of us even question that? Imagine a person who is on a wheelchair or has certain amount of special needs, wants to go to the restroom and has to hold it for good 14 hours. I mean, it's a long flight from India to New York, even from India to Africa, 11 hours. Bathroom is really, a toilet is not really a necessity. I mean, sorry, it's not really a luxury, but a necessity. So airplanes, when they can now give us cabins, complete cabins with all the luxuries in first class, I think as an ordinary human being, we deserve one accessible restroom per aircraft. And why is it that international community also doesn't make noise about it? Because that's been my constant endeavor, is the problems that we face every day, the small little obstacles that keep coming across in our daily lives. Let's look at it. It's called accessibility, as simple as that. It improves the quotient of happiness, happiness for living life with full enthusiasm.
Well said. And I'm totally with you on the accessible toilets issue. It affects so many people, especially people with not just people with mobility issues, but with hidden disabilities as well. As we get older, you're going to likelihood is that the gentlemen amongst us are going to encounter prostate problems and so on. We don't want to stop traveling. And why should people have to put up without access to the very basic dignity of being able to go to the toilet in
Yeah, like
peace?
I always say, retirement should not be equivalent to redundancy. It should be all about recreation.
Yeah.
So that's what we should do. When we get older, we should still feel free to go wherever we want, whenever we want.
Yeah. Antonio, I know you had a question.
I do. We have been following a lot of developments in the area of smart cities. Smart city seems to be a kind of a word that is all over the place, and we all seen that a good number of ideas and investments happening in India. So, and sometimes we are talking about large projects that involve, a good number of financial resources. So, how can you guarantee that when those projects are being developed, you think on accessibility from the early days of planning? Because sometimes it's basically it be very, is not effective to do it later because it will be very costly. But if you do it by default, you end up, doing providing a solution for the population, and in being a cost-saving solution if you just decide to fix as a later problem when everything is already done. Have you engaged at some level with government
Absolutely.
organizations in order to bring that to the table?
Absolutely. There has been a conference on smart cities that has started like about, I think, around 3 years back, 2.5, 3 years back, where Swayam has been a constant partner, and we have guided the government into harmonizing all the guidelines. Because in a country like India, of its scale and of its topography, you can imagine the difficulties government face, starting from both Jammu Kashmir right down to the Kanyakumari. So we've been positively engaged with them, trying to make sure that every little corner is made accessible and that there are harmonization of guidelines. Because we've got the urban development ministry have its own, we've got different municipalities have their own. So it's been a nightmare in terms of collating all that. But Swayam has constantly endeavored in the Smart Cities Committee. We are a permanent member in it, And yes, you're absolutely right. It's better to start at a policy stage rather than doing retrofitting later. So hopefully when the government comes up with smart cities, they take care of accessibility not only in infrastructure, but definitely also take care of transport, modes of transport that connects these small islands of accessibility.
I agree. And go ahead, Antonio. Did you want to follow up?
Just a quick comment. So when you are engaging with government ministers and with these institutions, do you feel that you need to convince them that how important this is, or you realize that they already acknowledge how important this is?
Working, with smart cities, we also work with BIS, that is Bureau of Indian Standards. So when we work with them, we realize that they are equally for it. They understand that it's a challenge and that they would like to overcome it. Yet, the biggest thing is awareness. Everywhere in the world, accessibility is talked about as a disability topic. Now we forget that we all will grow old, that we maybe sometime or the other break a bone or go through a temporary disability because of a sport. I'm not going to call them disabled, I'll call them people with reduced mobility. So it affects many more people, and that's what the government does understand. But the biggest challenge for them also is to do it, how to do it, where to begin, and how is it that we tackle it without spending too much. By spending too much, I mean wasting too much.
Sure.
So the right agencies, if they come together and they work with policymakers, give them support. After all, they're human beings too. And I'm sure that we will reach it. It's a long road, but somebody's got to start the baby steps.
We agree. And we appreciate that you're taking those gigantic steps in India. I have a colleague, Rosemary Musashio, who is in a wheelchair and has very limited mobility. And she was invited to speak in China. And she said, Deborah, I can't speak in China. I can't go from Ohio in the United States to China. I can't hold my bladder that long. And it's ridiculous because I am a older woman that gave birth to 2 children. So I have to get up and go to the restroom multiple times. I always get an aisle seat. So it does impact all of us. And also the points that you're making about accessibility, we all agree with you. The more accessible you make something, the better it is for all of us. For women that have baby carriages, and also tourism. Tourism is a big thing in India, and the more you make things accessible, the more tourism that you get. So there is a return on investment, but we're still trying to help. We're trying to help government officials understand you will get a positive return on investment. But I noticed on your website that y'all made one of the only accessible World Heritage sites accessible. It took you 2.5 years, but it's accessible. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that project. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's something that I'm really proud of. We started this in 2007 and we made the first UNESCO World Heritage site, the Qutub Minar, accessible, and which we were really appreciated for. But we didn't stop there. We made Fatehpur Sikri group of monuments completely accessible. We made the helped Taj become accessible. We helped Red Fort, Ajanta Ellora. So there have been a few of them, but we did it at a time where there was no money involved in it. And right now, luckily, we've got the Accessible India campaign. So there are many more people who are encouraged to do it and try and achieve those standards of accessibility. But as you all know, complete accessibility is really a misnomer, because what is accessible for me, for my need, may be different, a little different from another person's exact needs. But we've tried to make it as close as possible so that it becomes comfortable for every one of us to go for recreation. Because we must remember, recreation plays a very important role. Like you said, tourism starts with the elderly because that's when you're fancy free. Before that, you are so bogged down with all your responsibilities. in terms of looking after your house, your parents, your kids. You don't have that time to move around. And by the time you have time to move around, you've got aircrafts with no accessible bathrooms.
Yeah.
So
right.
you can do.
So I think that there's a lot to be done in the aviation space, because it feels like almost we're going backwards at the moment, which is a shame. So there's legislation in places like in the US right now, which is talking about accessible ticketing machines and so on. But then on the other hand, I'm talking to friends and colleagues of mine who are either visually impaired or have some other disability. They're now being forced to wait on aircraft, to be offboarded and taken in a wheelchair, because no one really seems to differentiate between the different types of disabilities and abilities that people have. So it almost feels like, oh well, if we can just wheel people like baggage through the airport, then it's okay, and we can, that's not treating people with dignity. And that's not treating people as customers either. That's treating people as a problem. And actually, that's something that I find irritating and upsetting on behalf of my friends. And I also think that it's not a way that you treat consumers. Especially since air travel's not the cheapest of hobbies. This kind of recreation is expensive recreation. So people. The only thing is that unlike in other forms of recreation, you can't vote with your wallet, because effectively what you're doing is you're unable to make a choice. It's not like one airline's better than another. A lot of this is actually the airports doing this as much as the airlines. Deborah, I know you've got a question. I'm hogging it again.
Well, my question, and I agree, totally agree with what you just said, Neil. And it's just ridiculous that we would consider going to the bathroom a luxury, and that it's a nice to have when we're human beings. That just it's hard for me to understand that, and it would be hard for me to have an aviation CEO explain to me why that is acceptable, because anyway, 80% of us acquire our disabilities after our birth. Unlike my daughter, who was born with Down syndrome, many of us acquire, including my husband and my mother and my father, they acquired their disabilities after living these lives. So you're doing a lot of very impressive work. I love the work that you're doing. And I know that India is very engaged in the smart city conversations. And I'm just wondering if they've brought you into these conversations, because wouldn't it be amazing if, as India is thinking about smart cities, they have people like you in there making sure that those smart cities are so smart that they include all of us, including people that are aging, people that are living their lives, and people with disabilities. So I was just wondering if you had any comments about that.
Oh, definitely. We are a part of the Smart City Committee. Yet, Deborah, there is a lot which needs to be done, because one thing is framing the rules, the other thing is implementing it. And again, I stress upon the topic that it's not just the disabled. Unfortunately, accessibility always is discussed with the disabled in mind. How about people that grow older? I would like every one of us to grow old, and that's a blessing, because I feel that's when, like in India and most countries alike, they've got a retirement age of 65. With the longevity of life now reaching an easy 80, what do you do with 25 years of no contribution? How do you contribute to the growth of anything? And let's not forget, today we are talking about inaccessibility. Government says it's for the disabled, but the minute they make things accessible, you'd be surprised how many entrepreneurs are there amongst people who are differently able. How many elderly can use their wisdom to bring about a change in the GDP. Everything adds to GDP of a particular nation. If you have more people who are going to be able to go out there and start an economic activity, even if I don't really have to work, I just have to be able to leave my home and go out. just for a cup of coffee, but economic activity begins the minute I buy that coffee. Government has to understand that when you grow better when you take people with you, not when you exclude certain sections of society and call them redundant. And this has been my effort. We've done some small films which have tried to incorporate this concept, and I would love it if I can share it with you all, because it's a simple way of touching people's life. Because in India, there are lots of street hawkers that are also there. They are unable to go and sell their wares on the streets because of it being completely inaccessible. So they are also rendered ineffective. They are also being sidelined. Either you do a job in a nice swanky cafe, or you just be a beggar. There is no alternative in the middle for them. So these are the few things that will actually change the GDP of a particular nation. It will improve the quality and the happiness quotient of every human being, because we all want to feel useful, be able to contribute to the society, no matter what age, what class, what sex do we belong to.
I agree. And there's I have so many questions, but I know Antonio has a question too, so I'm going to keep it short. But I totally agree with you. And I was asked on a show yesterday that I did, somebody asked me, which countries are the most accessible? And they also asked me which countries are enforcing accessibility. And I thought that was an interesting question, because there's some enforcement, but I'm not convinced that's the way that we change things. But which are the most accessible countries? Well, the UK is pretty accessible, the US, there are others, but every single country has a ton of work to do to truly be accessible. So I think India, with 1 billion people and all of the complexity and diversity and cultural that is part of India, I think it is such an opportunity for your country to show us what could be done, show us your humanity, show us your innovation, and really, really change things for all of us. This is not just a conversation about including people with disabilities, as you so eloquently said. So this is an opportunity. And my question was, I know that as you're making these things accessible, you're looking at it from physical accessibility, but I assume, and I want you to clarify this, that you're also looking at those things. All of these buildings, smart cities, also have technology as part that needs to be accessible as well. I was wondering if you'd comment on that, and then I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Antonio. So go ahead.
Yes, for sure. India is concentrating on the internet accessibility also in a major way. And I'm glad that they are keeping that in focus, because it helps so many other disabilities also be able to be mainstreamed. Especially people who are visually challenged benefit a lot from such technology. In fact, in India, technology is not even explored, because you start exploring technology if you're introduced to this topic. Unfortunately, my meetings with the Ministry of Education leaves me thinking that students don't even get exposed to these challenges that we are talking about in their whole student life. They're not even taught about things like this. How do you make assistive living better? The thing is to introduce these concepts to young minds in schools, in colleges, so that they can think about it. Because we've got, like you said, a huge manpower, but we also have great thinkers, but we're not giving them an opportunity, because we're not introducing this topic anywhere in our subjects. And having internet accessibility, because in today's time, mobile phones have done a wonderful job. They've penetrated up to rural India. 65% of India lives in the rural area. There is no talk of accessibility out there at all. We are talking about an accessible education system now, little bit equipped with internet, yet I feel we've got a long way to go. We'd like to have one accessible toilet every school in every village, so people can taste accessibility and the freedom that comes with accessibility when you have one accessible toilet per school. That way you can have the elderly go and teach, because we have a dearth of teachers, so the elderly, instead of being retired, can feel valuable. We can have the girl child feel safe because there's a toilet. Thirdly, we promote cleanliness and hygiene. So you've got like a whole mix of it all, especially when we talk about just one accessible toilet per village. I know I'm going all over the place, but the topic is such that I've worked with so many ministries that I've
No,
got so much to share.
no, no, I love where you're going with this. So no, you are right on track. We are very impressed with your work. No, you're doing a great job. Antonio, let me turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. No, when I came across your work, I realized there were so many things in common in relation to the way how we see the world and the way how we want to build it. So I realized, okay, I end up talking with Deborah and Neil. No, and there's someone here that we need to bring to AXSchat. In the same as you, a few weeks ago, we had a gentleman from an organization called Ayudas para Todos from South America, Felipe, who is a kind of a maker space where he's adapting existing technology and existing products and make them products of assistive technology in Colombia for people who are in rural areas to be able to use a computer. So he's able to change, let's say, a mouse to make sure that some people who are not able to use, to be able to use the web in their own way by adapting that. Can you tell, considering the challenges that we have on the sides of India, can you tell us about, is any type of work being made to somehow support people in rural areas to be able to participate in society? We know that the mobile phone already opens a good number of doors, but what else is being done to make sure that that group of people is not being left behind just because they are far from the large metropolitan areas?
Uh, do I be honest? Do I be politically correct? If I'm honest, there's so much work that still remains to be done because rural India is a complexity that people have not really been able to understand till now. They are not understanding the problem of it in the urban areas because there is such little awareness. As long as it remains, because in India, they keep talking over and over of disability population being only 2%, even though they've introduced a new law right now in 2016 that has widened the scope of disability and they've recognized from 7 disabilities, they've gone to 21. Still, they talk about a minor population. If we don't make this an issue that it affects each one of us at one point of life or the other, we will not be able to get through to the various ministries for them to make good policies for rural India. And I believe if we don't take care of accessibility and provide employment opportunities in rural India, we will have no smart cities because even smart cities would have slums. Even those places would have huge amount of migration. And what would you do about cities that are not so smart right now? So overall, I think government has to take accessibility into focus. Otherwise, we will go the Japan way when we have a geriatric population much higher than the youth. Right now, 65% of us are below the age of 35. Can you imagine 20 years from now, what would it be? So it's a huge number that we are talking about. And it's a big problem. It's just that we've got to reach to the various governments, to the various ministries, for them to understand about this topic. Yet, we need to stop talking about it under disability. It's a sustainability issue. It's not a disability issue. Sustainability for a city to keep on sustaining itself forever. Otherwise, we'll be stuck one point of time or the other.
I'll unmute myself. I think that's a great point. We definitely don't want to take the narrow view of accessibility. What we're, as organizations, we need to be doing is taking into account demographics and population change, and also mindful of the fact that, as you say, you get major economic rent from doing all of this work to be inclusive. It's not like you're only delivering this service for the 2% or 10% or 20%, depending on how you cut the cake, but actually that you're widening economic opportunities, and you have the halo effect and the knock-on effect, because as you generate one piece of business, that opens opportunities for other pieces of business. So it's, as you say, working with hearts and minds, but also, I guess, trying to find what are the projects that you need to seed that that growth in, and I think that you've chosen one which is the accessible toilets, which is a great one because sanitation is a huge issue. But also, in terms of technology, what are the seed projects do you see for technology?
Sorry?
So like you've seen with the accessible toilets, is it being a seed for economic opportunity? What about technology? Which technologies do you see as a seed to grow greater accessibility as a starting point for India?
There are lots of technologies that I'm a fan of. I like the current technology wherein you can go ahead and picture a particular door and understand its size, its width, its utility by just clicking a picture and posting it on the net so that another person can understand. Because in today's government, you can actually go about and click areas that are inaccessible and post it to them. Yet they're not using the right software to be able to do that. So what they do is they do not have an idea exactly what does that picture mean, what is the dimension, what is the problem. So that's one technology that helps. The other one for the visually impaired, honestly, in terms of technology, I have very little knowledge. And that's because in India, we don't even explore technology to a level that we should be exploring. I'm sure world over, there are many, many more technologies available that can make life simpler. Yet, because of lack of knowledge, simply lack of knowledge, we are unable to imbibe it and realize it. Because I said, in students, we don't even know about disability or reduced mobility as a topic, even in our postgraduate courses. Our buildings, even School of Architecture, we are not really taught about accessibility. It's just one chapter, but a chapter that affects us later in our lives. When we are young, we've got everything going for us, we've got the energy, we really don't care about the problems that we'll face tomorrow. But by the time we realize, it's too late to make that change. So my whole thing is that there are lots of technologies available, but we're not really very exposed to it. I wish we were.
Okay, so I think that's an issue that is endemic throughout the technology teaching, not just in India. By the way, I'm interested because actually there are huge pools of very clever technologists in India. I work with guys in India every day on technology, and yet it's not something that seems to be bubbling up necessarily. So maybe there's a question of how do you engage that, and yet India is still very family centric compared to maybe the Western world, where we've sort of dissipated and we're all living in our own little bubbles. So I would have thought that that essentially what you've got is the opportunity to if you focus on family, to raise that awareness around the issues, because it's there, it's in your home, it's your grandmother, it's the aunties that are just sat there. So why is that why do you think that connection is not being made? And then I'll let Antonio in, because I know you want to ask a question.
Okay. Yes, in India, we do have a very family-centric society. And unfortunately, it's the human spirit of adaptability that comes into play here. When we grow old, by old, I mean not so old, just maybe like retired at the age of 65, which is nothing. But we then have to give up our dreams because we want our children to have a stress-free life. We want them to go out. We just resign to the fact that we've lived our life. We've seen the world. We don't want to be a bother to everybody. But that's not the way not to be a bother. That's the way to ask questions is, what did I do wrong while I was earning my money? What did I not do to make myself empowered when I'm older? In India, you've got this huge amount of factor of having lived my life. Retirement out here is equivalent to redundant. And that's what we are trying to change by raising awareness. People don't use technology because they're not really exposed to so much technology. And children who are exposed to so much technology are eventually helping their grandmothers get more aware of it. But everything is so uh, such at an infant stage, if I may say so, that I still feel that we can do a lot more. I don't know if you can maybe get me in touch with the people that are doing amazing work in technology. Maybe we can put our minds together in terms of how to proliferate it, because the whole idea is talking to the government. I have in my so many years of experience, more than 20, I feel it's very important to work with the government, the ministries, and the policymakers like hand in glove. That's where the change starts. Of course, awareness to a common man that it's their issue. It's not some third party issue called disability issue. It is their issue. It will touch them not today, but some other time. Whatever people that I come across and the small videos that Swayam has made, we've tried to put across the message. And we are proud of the government that at least they have understood that this is a very important topic, which they must make a national topic in today's time.
No, thank you so much for that. And Neil was touching some of the points that I wanted to address before we close the interview, is that there are so many talented developers and technologists in India, people doing amazing work with impact all over the world when the simple line of codes that they develop. So I think, it's important to engage with that community, because sometimes we're talking about simple things and we're talking people that are amazing talent, and we are not. I see from your words, I see that in fact India is not taking advantage of that amazing talent that you already have. So I think it's something that needs to be done on that space, is to engage with that community and bring them to our cause.
Yes, of course. I think we should think of doing some things together which brings it all. I'd love to do something together which helps bring such talented people to the forefront. Because you're right, we've got this guy who has made a wheelchair that runs with thought. I mean, just imagine how it can change somebody's life for just being more mobile, because they've got some kind of problem with which their hands are also not that functional. Imagine if that could be translated into being able to be helped around the house, because everything in India cannot really be made accessible in a day. Yet for me, the major issue is awareness. People don't realize it's their issue. And as long as it remains a third party issue, like not mine, not families, but my neighbors might get it, somebody else will get it. As long as it remains like that, I don't see much future of it really bringing in a change. Because I agree with Deborah when she said that when you enforce these rules, they can only be enforced up to a certain limit. But if you make people understand this issue, it will go a long way.
So thank you so much for accepting this challenge to be here today with us, communicating with the world, and we really look forward to be able to extend this conversation and bring more people to it next Tuesday in our Twitter chat. We'd like to say thank you to Barclays for supporting our efforts to help us to make the conversation that we are having here more accessible. And once more, we look forward to see you Tuesday on Twitter. We really love your passion, and we feel somehow empowered for your words. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Antonio, Deborah, Neil, for having me over. I can't tell you how much it means to me, because for me, this is my passion. And I know I talk a lot, but sometimes you just have to do it.
We're grateful for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your patience.